By the facility of interneting, you can retrace the steps that led you to what everyone around you calls your life juncture. You can remake your contacts, you can visit up and bathe in the dusty comfort of nostalgias. So, tombstones of equinox rain clouds and trees of lightning later, I flew in on the Tuesday delay and taxied directly to Chester Ponsonby's, where he'd arranged to accommodate me and, as he said in his email, treat me like a prince. I explained the life juncture merely as a life juncture, rather than describing how my entire existence had melted down into a brown puddle like a Mars bar on a midsummer's day. I hoped he understood. I hadn't seen Ponsonby in 13 years. The previous time was in a hailstorm. He married Nicola Truffleback on a miserable afternoon. A hailstone the size of a golf ball smacked the celebrant in the forehead and knocked him unconscious. And then they drove away. He was, by any recollection, a pimply dweeb, an Anglo-Saxon specimen, not even a Norman, thick-rimmed, grubby, a champion at chess, a bore for battles of World War I, and already balding at 23. I imagined him as a pudgy, moon-faced accountant by now. The door opened and greeting me was a tall, dark Spanish man with shoulder-length hair and a well-groomed goatee. "Hello," I say. "I'm looking for someone named Chester Ponsonby." The Spaniard immediately stepped out and embraced me, squeezing, saying, "Simon, Simon, it's been so long," in a thick Catalan accent. When he finally let go, I said it again, uncomfortable. Hello, I'm looking for someone named Chester Ponsonby." The Spaniard grinned, opened his arms and reiterated with emphasis, "Simon, Simon, it's been so long." Ponsonby? No way. From that point on, not even in the door, I was perplexed, a ridiculous prince. No angle nor symmetry bore the slightest resemblance to the Chester J. Ponsonby I had known and not liked very much 13 years beforehand. Not his face, not his nose, not his eyebrows, not his ears, not his voice, not the colour of his eyes, nor that of any of his ancestors either. Chester Ponsonby. The internet had failed me, I surmised. I've got the wrong man. Bustling from the rear room came Nicola Truffleback. Yes, the real Nicola Truffleback for sure, and exactly 13 years older. "Oh, hi!" she exclaimed, dramatic. Unchanged. Same girl. Come in, come in." A smile. "Chester," she says. "Chester, honey, help him with his bag." Chester, honey, help me with my bag. But didn't Chester Ponsonby have a mole on his milky white English left cheek, and a nose that was flat and British, not pointy in a Mediterranean sort of way? A dweeb, a geek, a dickhead. He could bore you to suicide with tales of the Battle of the Somme. His idea of a big night in was 4-hour chess marathon with take-out Slurpees from Pizza Hut. I shook my head and thought, I must be getting my memory of him confused with someone else, a case of mistaken identity, possibly attributable to my former cannabis habit or perhaps just the passing years. Either way, this Chester Ponsonby carrying my bag and welcoming me into his and Nicola's apartment was someone I was certain I had never met before in my entire long-legged life. "Do I know you, senor?" "Simon, Simon, it's been so long," he said again. It was something he'd rehearsed. In fact, it was the only sentence he seemed to know. "You've lost a lot of weight," I said, but failed to mention that he'd also gained 8 inches in height, olive skin, brown eyes, a full head of black follicles, and a Spaniard's broken English. "Did you have a good flight?" asked Nicola. "Terrible," I said. "Yeah, it's Jupiter and Aries," she assured me. Jupiter and Aries? At this instant, flashing forth from the etheric, It was as though a row of candles burst into flame, and looking around, shaking off my Spanish discombobulation, I was suddenly cognizant of their living room, tidy and squat, replete with occult paraphernalia, pentacles and sphinxes, the seal of Solomon, sigils of Austin Spare, remnants of the Gnostic Rosary, insignia from the 11th grade of esoteric masonry, hexagrams from the wheel of the great I Ching, the High Priestess card from the Rider-Waite Tarot sitting between the B and the J pillars of the mystic adytum. Nice place, I said, looking around. Cosy. I glanced at the bookshelves, an array of soft-bound mystica. Nicola explained that the rent in the district had trebled over the last 3 years, and the prices were driving away ordinary folk like her and Chester. I looked at Chester for confirmation of this realty assessment. He smiled. Simon, Simon, it's been so long, he said yet again, and threatened to hug me a second time. And how long have you been here? I asked. 7 years now, said Nicola, but at this rate we'll have to move. Sweet girl. No one could ever work out why she would marry a pasty-faced dork like Ponsonby. At the wedding, several drunken guests had almost said so. I had almost said so. Everyone thought she was destined for my best friend Neville. He celebrated the hailstorm, a disappointed man. Sitting, she introduced me to their dog, Mathers, an old border collie with remarkably floppy ears. He lay in the corner, rarely moving nowadays, she explained. And Mathers is too old to move. The move would probably kill him, she added with compassion. Mathers is everything to us. I looked over at the dog. Its knowing brown eyes rolled across to catch my gaze. I felt it didn't like me. Childless, just Mathers, working. Nicola was a librarian, she said. Chester, between jobs. It's very kind of you to put me up, I said. Awkward silence. So great to see you, Simon, Nicola then enthused. She was completely phony, but the so-called Chester took it as a cue to exclaim in a thoroughly Spanish way, Simon, and I waited for it's been so long, but it didn't arrive this time. Dinner was Spanish fabadas and tortillas with sour cream. Then after dinner, some TV, broken conversation, not a chess set in sight, and I retook my bearings and realised to myself that, by golly, I have never met this handsome Spanish dude named Chester Ponsonby before in my entire freaking life. Do you remember that science teacher we had? I laughed at one point. What was his name? Chester grinned at me Spanishly. Oh, you mean old Snodgrass, Professor Snodgrass, interrupted Nicola. She knew. Later I tried asking, do you remember that time we drove up to the lake one Saturday afternoon, Chester? What was the name of that lake again? The Spanish Chester grinned at me Spanishly again, as if to say once more, it's been so long. Whoever this guy was, he didn't have a single memory, not one conforming to the stated record. Did he remember the time Timmy Piper and Maria LaPetri were caught tickling Richard in the stairwell, or the time Matthew Frilby threw up all over the piano at the music recital in Year 11? Not a thing. Hey, what about the time you got caught in the lift in the science building? I joked, reminiscing. Those were the days. Hey, Chester. Nicola interrupted by jumping to her feet and fussing over Mathers, who, aged and patchy, had strings of saliva hanging from his mouth. He's in the early phases of Alzheimer's, she explained. Oh, dogs get Alzheimer's, I wondered. Nicola said there was new research suggesting so. I think I must be getting it too, I said. My memory's not what it used to be. I looked around once more. Candles, the Kabbalah wall chart, the moon planting guide, talismans for warding off the ghosts of former days. Do you remember the time, Chester? I tried again. When we locked you in the trunk of Steve Miller's clunky Falcon down by the railway station? Turning to Chester. Nothing. At which Nicola, pretending to yawn, declared it bedtime. At this point, shaking myself out of a lethargy of bland acceptance, I felt like saying, "Who are you, and what have you done with that poor pimply dork I once knew and despised?" But then I remembered jet lag and wondered, who am I to pry? Maybe Nicola had put him through a meat grinder and was using his identity to smuggle in illegal immigrants from Barcelona. Oh well. In any case, I hoped that after a good sleep the world might perhaps return to its frayed normality. Maybe I would wake up in the morning, the Spaniard would be gone, the occult odds and ends would be transformed into war memorabilia of the Hun, and the freckled Ponsonby of old, now an intensely dull accountant, would be sitting at the breakfast table boring me senseless with tales of hapless German campaigns, just as I'd remembered. Bedtime? Sure. I'd had enough for one day. My life juncture was calling. What was wrong with me, I doodled. I longed for happy recollections, sustainable certainties. I almost asked Nicola if she could read my palm and tell me that I would travel. This was not the trip I'd hastily arranged. Bedtime, I said. Yeah, I'm sort of weary. And I was. Then bedtime also failed to be uneventful. One expects an uneventful bedtime by the days when misspent nostalgias lead you off to rainy cities just in the hopes of reconstituted change. I had no desire to detail that brown puddle of sludge that replaced my golden days. I was decidedly off my game. I was happy to take whatever comes. So that night, a stranger in a strange land, I went to bed with only ordinary expectations. I cleaned my teeth, stripped down to my boxers and settled down to listening to unfamiliar streets when, drowsy, I was interrupted. It was barely a few minutes after lights out, I suppose, by unaccountable noises from the room beyond the bedroom wall. Opening my eyes, I figured it was the adjoining apartment, presumably apartment 93. The wheezing of a damaged man. I flicked on the light and sat up. As I say, the wheezing of a damaged man, wheezing in the dead of night. Then at that moment, Nicola and Chester rushed in, wearing their fluffy pyjamas. "What?" said my face. "Listen to that," said Nicola, hushed, motioning her earlobe wallward. "Can you hear that?" I listened. There was, perhaps, a gaseous and wheezing sound in fits and spurts, muffled by the old-world plaster. Definitely. What is it? I wondered. Not it. Who? My hostess corrected me. Okay. Who is it? She made me listen again. Do I hear it this time? I do. It was keeping me awake. I checked that I was not in fact dreaming and looked at Chester, tall, dark and Spanish, standing by my bedside table. There was a long silence, then a cough from the room beyond. Nicola was in a drama school suspense. "Nicola," I said, "who is it?" "It's Alistair Crowley," she said quietly. A whisper, a pause. "But you're not to tell anyone." Well, the secret was safe with me. I decided to listen again, as a practical but stopgap measure against consideration of what she had just announced. Said what? Say that again. "Definitely something," I say. "It's a wheezing sound, like someone's got pneumonia." "Yeah, it's Alistair Crowley," says Nicola, still hushed. "He's dying." The Spaniard had nothing to add. I looked at him. He said not a thing in Spanish insofar as there is a Spanish way of saying nothing. "If you mean the notorious English occultist from the first half of the 20th century, I say, I suspect he might be dead already." "We do mean the notorious English occultist from the first half of the 20th century, don't we, Chester?" said Nicola, turning to Chester. Chester says, "Si." "And he's not dead already. He faked his own funeral and disappeared, having discovered the elixir of life." I decided to listen again before asking, then why is he dying? The answer was obvious. Because members of the Black Brotherhood came around to his apartment recently disguised as guys installing broadband and took the elixir away from him and is now in the possession of the Black Lodge. Without the elixir, Master Therion will surely die. Master Therion, Aleister Crowley, prophet of the Eon of Horus. I see, I said. I had another listen to the wall. What else could I do? Sort of a wheezing sound, I confirmed. Or perhaps more of an electric sound. It's hard to tell. Might be a type of drill or a food processor. Over the next half hour we all listened in paranormal silence and looked at the bare wall as if looking at it would help us hear. But the wheezing had ended and the night was still, and the sounds of the unfamiliar streets were a simple lullaby again. Eventually Nicola turned to Senor Chester and said, "It stopped," and they agreed, without much further communication, to go back to bed. So, I said helplessly, "I'll call you if I hear anything, will I?" Nicola just shook her head as if to say, "There are dark days upon us, dear friend. Fiat lux." I turned off the light, put my dazed head to the pillow, and in due course dreamt of a chubby Scotsman on a mountain top thinking lucidly, what had they done with Ponsonby? And determined that next morning the world would be normal again. There's no need to describe breakfast. It was Spanish omelettes, and the dumpy frame of Ponsonby I had known was not at the breakfast table. Instead, some strange Spaniard with a neat goatee sat grinning and sharing not a single coherent recollection. Nicola stayed in her room except for once, stepping out barefoot in a long black robe, swinging a censer and fumigating the living room with dense clouds of frankincense and dragon's blood. It was then I knew I should be moving on. "Do you remember," I asked Chester, "the time I mistook your sister for a man and she attacked me with a pop rivet gun? What's her name again?" The Spaniard looked inane, all smile, and offered me another omelette, since I was being treated like a prince. "Simon, Simon," he said. I know, I said. "It's been so long." I called a cab and sat waiting to be buzzed from reception. Nicola went to work and Chester took a 2-hour shower. I flicked through a book on the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage, a chilling tale of demonry and spells and crusty evocation. Sitting thus in my reverie, Mathers of the long floppy ears dawdled out from the dark kitchenette. He walked directly up, drooling with Alzheimer's, and just as the buzzer went, looked up at me, rolling his big brown eyes, and spoke. "That really is Aleister Crowley in there," the dog said. "And when he dies, all hell breaks loose. You know that, don't you?" Then he turned around and dawdled back into the darkness. I grabbed my bag, tripped in calculated haste, hurried down to my cab and was, for the remainder of the morning, content to be driven far, far away through the winding streets of my life juncture, reflecting, yet not reflecting, on the fable of half-forgotten pasts.